People want to use grades as punishment. And what they don't realize is the kid doesn't care. They don't care if you give me a 0 or you give me an F, because grades don't motivate.
What would you say does?
What motivates is relationships.
Relationships.
Relationships motivate, but grades don't motivate unless you're a really high achieving child. Okay. Because they don't want to make, and they have a fear of failure. Okay. Um, but those that just scoot by, they don't care. They don't care. Once again, you want to get them to begin to own their learning.
Welcome to Innovating Education, the podcast where we spark solution driven conversations to transform the educational landscape. Our goal is to inspire actionable change by fostering positive collaborative dialogue. Each episode, we engage with visionary educators, decision makers, and change makers to explore innovative strategies and fresh perspectives that improve learning outcomes. Whether you're a teacher, administrator, policymaker, or simply passionate about education, you'll find practical insights, thought provoking discussions to make an impact. I'm your host, Dr. Riley Williams, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with an incredible leader in education, Dr. Amy Downing. Dr. Amy Downey has dedicated her career to transforming student learning. She served in Metro Nashville public schools for over 3 decades, including 11 years as a principal at both DuPont Hadley Middle School and Charlotte Park Elementary. During her time in Nashville, she spearheaded innovative programs in standards based grading and strategic planning. One of her most impactful contributions was the Just Read program, which has transformed literacy engagement and outcomes by encouraging students to choose books that match their independent reading levels. She also championed student led conferences and home visits, strengthening school family relationships and fostering student ownership of learning. Now retired from Metro Nashville, Dr. Downey continues to shape the future of education as the chair of the Education Department at Freed Harmon University. She also serves as the president of the Tennessee Association for Independent Liberal Arts Colleges of Teacher Education, where she is committed to shaping teacher preparation and leadership. We have so much to discuss today, from fostering a culture of literacy to building student ownership and leading systemic change in education. Dr. Downey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here today.
I'd like to start with your journey. Every great educator has a story. What inspired you to enter the field of education, and what led you to the leadership roles that you've held?
Oh, that's a real interesting question. So, when I came to the university, or at the time it was called a college because it was so many years ago, I didn't know what I really wanted to be. I didn't know. At 18, it's hard to make a decision as to what you want to do for the rest of your life. And at that time, you weren't exposed to as many options as you are today. The world wasn't as flat as it is today. And yeah, I grew up in a small town and maybe not lots of exposure to different options and that kind of thing. But when I got here, I was playing on the tennis team, and my coach was very influential, and we were having conversation about what are you going to do? She happened to be my advisor as well. And I said, I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. And so we started talking about different options and that kind of thing. And she said, here are some choices. Here are some things you might want to look into. It just happened that education came up. And when I determined that I wanted to be an educator, things in my life just started clicking and started rolling. And I became very interested in school and very interested in what I was doing. My grades improved, and I found a passion, and I knew that was what I wanted to do when that was brought up. And we started talking about, what does that look like? What does that feel like? What are the expectations for that role? And things were a lot different back in the 80s than they are now in 2025, when you're trying to guide people to go into education now versus in the 80s. But that's how I landed in education. It wasn't necessarily someone speaking to me and it was a calling or anything like that. It was, I had to find a path, and I had to find one pretty quickly in the 80s so I could figure out what I wanted to do with my life at 18 years old.
Looking back on your years as a principal and leader, what would you say were the pivotal moments that shaped your vision for education?
Okay. That I'm gonna tell you, I can tell you exactly the day my thoughts about education changed was the day that I had my daughter. That's the day
Really?
that education changed for me. Um, and it changed because my whole perception about what I wanted or what other students deserved changed because they deserve exactly what my daughter deserved. And so that's the day it all changed. The exact time, the exact day when I held that baby, and it was a huge aha moment for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I really want to get into your Just Read program.
Sure.
This has been a game changer for fostering literacy in Metro Nashville schools. Can you share the story behind how this initiative was born?
Sure. I had spent 29 years in middle school and in the middle level teaching and then principaling and then working in central office with middle level students. And I was in central office and I thought, this just isn't my mojo. This just is, I'm not, feel like I'm being what I need to be as an educator. So I wanted to go back to the school. And so I went back to elementary. Why? I don't know. But I went to elementary school, didn't know much about reading, didn't know much about anything elementary, terrified of kindergartners. But anyway, I knew that reading was important based on what I had learned from my daughter. And I knew literacy was a number one game changer for students to be successful in life. You can't get by in life without being able to read. So I surrounded myself with people who knew how to teach reading, who knew how to, and it was a school that was a high priority school, high poverty, high EL school. And I knew that I had to surround myself. And I went in a situation where I was able to select a lot of staff. I was able to say, okay, I got to select people that know more about this than I do. And if I don't select people around me that don't know more about this than I do, then we're not going to be successful because I sure don't know how to do this. So I've got to learn from the best. So went on a mission to try to find people. But I also knew enough to know enough about poverty and ESL and to know that they were lacking in materials at home. I also knew enough about libraries and librarians and not knocking that, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking that organization or that facility in the school because it has its place. I'm not saying that. But I'm also saying that a lot of dollars have to go into the library. You have to return those materials. You have to make sure that the librarian's only one person. Students would go in there and they might pick the biggest, thickest book there is, knowing that they can't read that book. They just carry it home and bring it back and turn it in, and they weren't reading that book. There's no way they were reading that book. They might look to see if there's a picture in it, but there's no way a little kindergartner comes out with a book this thick. So how much guidance was given for those students to go in and get a book that they could actually read? Okay, so that's how the conversation began about creating Just Read. So the conversation, I think we need to do something where students take home books that they can literally read on their own. You got ESL students. Parents can't necessarily read the material. They might be able to speak English, but they can't assist their children in reading. So we need to make sure that students are taking home books and materials that they can feel successful with. And if they can't feel successful in reading, they're not ever going to read. So we've got to figure out what students' interests are. Why are we sending home Cinderella books with little boys? Why are we sending home truck books with little girls? Why are we sending home the same title with every student in the school? We need students to have options so they become interested in wanting to read. Let them have choice and let them pick selections that they are successful with. And so that's how Just Read was born. And So I had, because I was in a high priority school and because we were a Title I school, we had dollars that we could purchase text. And I wanted to create a room that had books on students' levels and bins that they could go in and select a text that they were interested in. And on a weekly basis, they could come in and select 4 or 5 texts that were on their level, and they would have the week to read those texts and then bring those books back the next week and select 4 or 5 more and read those texts. And so then the goal was to watch their reading level improve, and I contribute the success of that school with the Just Read program. In addition to that, they would have different levels of assignments to do with those texts. Like for kindergartners, they might draw a picture. For the next level up, they might write a sentence about the book they read. Or the next level, they might write a paragraph. It just depended on the level that they were. And we had notebooks for them to fill out what their responsibility was to do in the mornings. And the students could come down and they all had a little Just Read bag that we had purchased and had Just Read on it and had their name on it. And they were very good at keeping up with it. And we had great participation with that. And they took ownership in that, and the teachers encouraged that. And it was a totally different program than AR. And people would say, why not AR? There was money invested and time invested, but once again, it wasn't a test. It was taking something home that you chose, that you were interested in, and you got to draw a picture, or it wasn't a multiple choice test. And we did this pre-K through 4th grade. Pre-Kers took books home to read. It was a picture book or whatever it was, so they could draw a picture of what the story was about. So we did that. I was there for 3 years, and we went from a high priority school to a reward school in 3 years.
Oh my goodness. There's 2 things I was thinking about when you were talking about that question. The first one was when you were talking about surrounding yourself by experts. I think that is the sign of a true leader, someone that creates a team, that surrounds themselves with people, that leadership is not just in isolation. And so that was really powerful to me. The other thing is my daughter is dyslexic. Reading is just something she is not interested in. And yesterday, actually, I think it was a couple days ago, we were at the grocery store and she loves Minecraft, loves it. So there was a magazine and she was like, Mama, can I have this? Yes, absolutely. You can have it. Anything to get you to try to read on your own. Let's do this. So I was really happy about it. I think that what you were talking about with having interests and really creating student interest, that's the game changer. That's how we get students excited about reading and so that they don't feel like it's a chore.
In addition to that, let me say that we would recognize students when they would read so many books, we would take their picture and put their picture up in the hall. And parents would come in and see their picture on the wall, and they were proud of that. So then they became invested, and they would encourage their children and ask them where their Just Read bag was and where their so it became a cultural thing, and not just a climate thing. It became cultural in the school as to, are you reading? Where's your Just Read bag? That kind of thing. So parents became really invested in Just Read as well.
So, what specific challenges did you encounter when developing and implementing Just Read?
I think it became labeling the text, getting the text in the right bin, making sure we had enough of each level that you could have a school of 500 students to be able to take 5 books a week home. That's huge. And we had a lot of books all over the school that when I got there, that it was just a school that had books stuck everywhere. So we just got all of those books, got them in a room, and just started dividing them out and labeling them and that kind of things. We had a literacy coach. She did a phenomenal job in organizing that and getting those in the right bins and getting that up and going. So that was a blessing to have that. I couldn't have done that by myself. I'm good at coming out and saying, this is what I'm thinking, and then other people contributing to that idea. It's not just on Amy Downey, "Oh, this is what she did." No, now how can we come together and add to this to make this work? I had an idea of, hey, what can we do in the summer for these students? Can I buy a van and drive around in some of these neighborhoods and get them some books and that kind of thing? And that never came to fruition, but it was lofty idea, but it didn't happen the 3 years I was there.
You certainly made an impact. Going back to AR, we talked about how with AR they have multiple choice questions and just read we're doing pictures, we're writing, and what especially made that effective to improve our student engagement and our outcomes?
Yeah, I think that when you're thinking about what skills students need in life, and I'm not just thinking about end results as far as end of the year testing or anything like that. You think about what do students need in life. They need to know how to write. They need to know how to fill out applications. They need to know how to complete sentences, to do paragraphs, and to be able to think about what does comprehension, what does this mean, and to be able to express the meaning of that particular book or that particular picture or whatever that might be, but you need to be able to see their thinking. And you don't see people's thinking or students thinking in a multiple choice test. You see their thinking in their writing and their drawing. And so when you think about that, just read really what you were able to see what they were thinking, what they were able to comprehend. Were they able to put their thinking down in writing? Were they able to put their thinking in drawing, in pictures, that kind of thing?
And that really leads me into your student ownership and engagement. You've prioritized this in learning. What sparked your commitment, and why do you believe it's a crucial aspect of student success?
I think it's a crucial aspect of anybody. I think that in the workplace, if you don't have ownership of your job or your expectations of your job or your workplace, you're not going to be successful. If you don't believe in the mission and the vision of your workplace or what you're trying to achieve in that workplace, then you don't need to be there. Okay. So I think it's very important to begin working with students at a young age about internalizing in themselves ownership of what is important to them, and you want their learning to be important to them forever, because that's one thing no one can take away from you is your learning. People can take away your money, people can take away your clothes, people can take away your car, people can take away all kinds of things, but they can't take away your thinking. They can't take away your knowledge. And if you get in difficult situations, you can think your way out of it. You can process those things, but if you don't have the knowledge to do that, or you're just going to sit there and dry up and shrivel away. So I believe it's an important skill for anybody to have. And even if you're not happy in your job and career, at least you'd have the knowledge and to how to get out of it and not just sit there and be depressed and hate it every day in and day out. At least, how do I go about looking for something different? How do I find joy in what I do every day to contribute? And owning what you do is I believe, a lifelong skill that everybody needs to develop.
Now, student led conferences are an innovative way to give students a voice in their learning. How do these conferences work, and what makes them so powerful?
We started actually I learned about student-led conferences when I was in middle school. I had 2 a team of 2 teachers that someone introduced me to student-led conferences. I had heard about them as a principal, but I was a relatively young principal at the time when they introduced me to that, and they wanted to do student-led conferences, and I said, "Y'all go ahead and do them. I'm gonna see what you do in there." They had student-led conferences, so I went down to see what this was all about that they were talking about. And it went so well in that classroom. Their portfolio, matter of fact, they had pizza boxes and the students were putting their work in pizza boxes and they were able to share that with their students, with their parents. And it worked so well that later we did it school wide at the middle school I was at. So I thought when I got to the elementary school, I thought, there's no reason why we can't do student led conferences in an elementary school. I started talking to few key people in the school about it, and I said, "What do you think about this idea of student-led conferences?" Because we had developed these data books for every grade level, pre-K all the way up to 4th grade, and the assistant principal and myself, we had data conferences with every 3rd and 4th grader individually. We talked with them about their data and where they were and what they could do to improve and then we would go back and when they took another assessment, we saw where they were and there was improvements in some of them and it just seemed to empower them, to help them. That was another way that they could take some ownership of their learning. And so we took those data notebooks, pre-K all the way up to 4th grade we did student-led conferences. So people were questioning and saying, "How do you do that in pre-K? Do you know those little pre-Kers took their parents through their centers and showed them how to do centers in pre-K?" Was the best evenings that we ever did was to do that, and you wouldn't believe how empowered the students were, and then how grateful the parents were to see what their students could tell them about their own learning. The only and it's not a regret because that's the way parent conferences are anyway, but if you could get every parent to come and bring their child to something like that, what it would do to them, but we had great turnout for things like that. Parents would come after you did the first time word got out, second time, it was amazing. The turnout that came and parents would sit there. So this left nobody out because teachers were just walking around. Parents could come in. They didn't have to wait in the hall and wait for a one-on-one with the teacher. They could come in there, sit down with their child with their notebook, go through their data. Teachers could come by, and if the parent had a question, they could ask. They could float around and talk. So that way, everybody got attention and everybody got information about their child from their child, how well that they were doing in class. And it wasn't about so many times you go to conferences and it ends up being about behavior. That's just a small piece of what goes on. And we tried to turn the conversation about learning and about that kind of conversation instead of behavior. Because when you start focusing on learning and not on behavior, students begin to change their behavior because they want to do the learning part so they can tell people what they are doing in class. So your behaviors begin to change and the learning becomes more evident in your school.
At least for me, I can remember being in school and I consider myself a really good student, but I always had anxiety at parent teacher conferences. I was just like, what is this teacher going to say about me? Are my parents going to be upset with me by the end of the night?
Yeah. And
So I
this
imagine
way
it helped with anxiety.
that's right. This way the student is involved, and the student can say, "The reason I didn't do well on this is because I was turned upside down underneath my desk." So the student becomes the owner of not only the behavior, but also the owner of the learning. And the parent can say, "What happened here?" You know why you did really well here, but you didn't do so well on this. What happened? And then the student can own that and explain what happened. It doesn't come from the teacher, it comes from the student.
Now, home visits are another way that you've strengthened student ownership and family involvement. How do these visits impact student learning, and how do you ensure that they're both productive and respectful?
Yeah, this was something that, came during the elementary, time. We ended up I believe it was with a grant in our, district, and I volunteered, okay, to take this on, and our teachers, I believe, got some kind of stipend or something, which was irrelevant at the time, but they had to go in pairs, okay? They set up meetings to go into the homes of the students. And you talk about empowering. That was empowering. The teachers would come back, and it was a totally different mindset about a student or the parent teacher relationship totally shifted when they could make that home visit, when they realized that the teacher, and it was always positive. You could not go in and talk anything negative about home visits. When you made a home visit, it was always, you always had to make it a positive home visit. It always had to be, you said something positive about the student. You might take them something to eat, or the parent might fix you something or offer you some coffee or something of that nature, but it always thrilled the student when the teacher made that home visit. It was a very empowering program. I don't know if that's still going on or not at this point, but it helped build relationships. It helped form bonds with the school. It helped parents to feel more comfortable to come into the school, to be a part of the community, and to help their student. When the teacher needed their assistance at school, they were more willing to come and participate or to help if their student needed a little nudge to do something differently. They were much more willing to assist. So it was a powerful program.
Was there a selection process to when a teacher would make a home visit?
I think it was just based on their roster. They would call. I think maybe we sent out a letter and asked for volunteers first. Was there any parent who would like to have a home visit to start with? And this is what it was about, just to get to know you. And then they would send the letter back if they were interested in having a home visit. So it was basically first, are you interested in having a home visit? And this is what we're trying to accomplish. It wasn't any secretive thing or anything like that. We were just trying to be open to get to know you better, to come in and know more about your child so that we could educate them better.
I imagine that really strengthened the relationship too, because when a parent goes into a teacher's room, it's completely different than when they're coming into the house. There's a power dynamic change,
Right.
right?
That's
It
exactly right.
You feel more on the same level. And then I imagine with the home visits, the students are right there with the teachers and the parents. It's not
Mhm.
a separation,
That's
right?
right. That's right. That's right. That's right. And they get to see the kid's room if they let them through there. It's just, and you get to know what the child really likes to play with and who their siblings are and who their dad is. So it's a very, I think it's just a great way to do things. Our school, our elementary school was more of a community type school. So people lived very close by. It wasn't spread out all over the urban area, so it wasn't as you didn't have to go miles and miles to visit someone.
So, what were the key steps to preparing students to effectively lead their own conferences and participate in the home visits?
Yeah. So for the conferences, we had a list of things that the teachers went over in class to talk with the students about what the expectations were, what to expect. Of course, it was different based on the grade level and what they could handle and what their developmental process was. So, in the pre-K classroom, of course, it was more teacher led because the teacher would guide them and say, "Now go to the center and show them what you did over here." And then as we get older, they would have their notebook and they would know you got them through each section. You go through your ELA data and then you go through your math data, and there were cues in there, like they would put Post-it notes in there the day of or the day before as to what they need to talk to their parents about. So they prepped to talk about what they need, like a lesson plan. They need to know what they need to talk to their parents about and discuss that with them. So that's how we prep for that. The teachers helped them know what they needed to talk to their parents about. And then I think most teachers put a little something up on the board so they wouldn't forget the order in which they need to go.
And for the home visits, was it just the letter to the parent, or were there discussions with the child before entering the home?
I I don't really recall, that's been a while ago. I think it was mainly with the parent. It was, with the adults that had those conversations, and I think the student was aware that the teacher was coming. I think the teacher would say, "I'll see you this afternoon. I'll be coming to your house," or something like that. They weren't left out of the equation. I just don't remember exactly how that protocol went.
As someone who's worked on district wide strategies, including standard based grading, strategic planning, what were the biggest systemic shifts that you believe are necessary to create more student centered learning environments?
I think from being at central office, I think one of the major things that needs to happen is in every school is they have to have a mission and vision that is livable. And it has to be alive in every school. I think that's one of the keys in every school to be able to make major change. It has to be lived every day of the school and has to be reminded every day and has to be seen every day in those classrooms. So it can't be some highfalutin words that nobody understands. It has to be something that is reality and something that can be achieved. Your vision, you don't achieve. It's like a mirage out there, and when you get closer to it, it scoots on out a little bit. But your mission, you should be doing that every day, and you should be seeing that every day. At my elementary school, we did a marketing type plan. I had been through some uh, classes, I guess, so to speak, or in some sessions about how do you market. And I'm not a marketer. I don't have any business classes under my belt at all, but we had done some things at the middle level to market our middle schools. And we had worked with a marketer and we wanted to have a mantra for our school. And we wanted to have a visual that represented our school. And when you saw that visual, you knew what that visual meant, and you knew that visual represented adults, community, or parents, and teachers, staff surrounding a child. And that's what we were focused on, doing what was best for students. And when you saw that, you knew where that place was and you knew what went on in that place. That still exists today at that school, still exists. When you think about those things, if you have that and you live that every day, that changes schools, okay? When every school is changed, every district is changed. When you look at from a systemic change from something such as a policy or something like that, like standards based grading, that is that was a painful change, okay? Because if as many teachers as there are, that's as many philosophies on grading as there is. So if you have 1,000 teachers, there's 1,000 philosophies on grading, okay? That was now we started with the middle level. That wasn't as painful as when we tried to branch it out to the high school level. That was painful, and I don't think it stuck at the high school level. It stuck, I think, in the middle and the elementary pretty good, but it didn't stick in the high school level, I don't believe. And people wanna use grades as punishment, and what they don't realize is the kid doesn't care. They don't care if you give me a 0 or you give me an F, because grades don't motivate.
What would you say does?
What motivates is relationships.
Relationships.
Relationships motivate, but grades don't motivate unless you're a really high achieving child, okay? Because they don't wanna make and they have a fear of failure, okay? Um, but those that just scoot by, they don't care. They don't care. Once again, you want to get them to begin to own their learning, but if you give them an F or 0, they're not owning their learning. They get by without doing it. So, the philosophy behind standards-based grading or something like that is and my philosophy is do what's best for children. Um, and I still live by that even at higher ed. You have to do what's right by children. I still call my higher ed adults my children. They're a lot younger than I am, even though they're adults. They're not fully developed in the brain and they need guidance and they need to be reminded that they have to take ownership of where they're fixing to be in a classroom with 20, 25 formidable children. And what are you going to do to help them own their learning and take ownership of their lives as they grow and develop? And how are you going to take ownership of your life because you're having a difficult time of it for yourself right now as a 20, 21-year old taking ownership of yourself without your parent having to call me to get you out of something at 21 years old. So you've got to take ownership. So when you go back to the standards based grading, when you've got 1,000 different philosophies, how do you shift those philosophies? You give example after example. And what you do is you work with those who adapt or adopt on the front end very quickly. Okay. And hopefully those people can help you bring on those that are on the edge and you get a majority. And then you always have those that'll never adopt, never without force. And they're always looking to prove you wrong. See, I told you this wasn't going to work. Right. But I do that still. I still teach that way here in higher ed. I do that here. I give students chances 'cause it's about the learning, not about earning, and I believe life is about learning. It's about learning from your mistakes. It's about, grace and mercy, and there's not a person on this earth that hasn't received some kinda grace or mercy from somebody along the way, or we wouldn't be where we are, and if we look back at our lives, even in our educational career, and I'm talking about as a student from kindergarten through higher ed, we've had some kind of grace or mercy along the way, and we need to extend that to the students that we teach today. And I truly believe that, and that's what standard of grace grading is about, extending grace and mercy.
I hate to give myself a plug, but
Well,
when
do
you were
that. You need to.
so, in one of my children's books, we you were talking about mantras. The premise of the book is we have a student who's very nervous about playing in a basketball game, and his coach points at the banner. They're the knights, right?
Mhm.
And so the child actually says, "I am a knight. I am loyal, brave, and true." And that was their mantra. That was how they encouraged their kids. And so I love that. I love any ability to tie in like a mascot or create something that really empowers the student. That's a beautiful mantra. So Thank you.
I don't know if I answered your question totally about the standards-based grading or the systematic change, I'll just say it that way, but is not easy to do that kind of change. It takes a lot of perseverance, and it takes a lot of believing in the direction you're going. You can't straddle the fence when you're trying to make that kind of change. You got to believe it, and you gotta live it, and you got to, keep keep chipping away.
So, when implementing these innovative programs like Just Read, leadership buy in is crucial. How have you navigated conversations with our educators and administrators to gain that support for your new initiatives?
I think that one of the things is the success of where I've been and what's happened with the places that I've been and the reputation when you've been to places and things work out and you have success, and people tend to want to listen to that a little bit. You're not always a prophet in your own land, but when they see that your school or your students are rewarded for their successes, then they want to know, hey, how are you doing that? Then they tend to listen a little bit more. I had a little bit more difficulty with that in central office than as a principal, as a peer. When you're a peer, you're sitting in the same seat they're sitting in, and I get that. Um, More so than somebody who's gone to central office and they think the people in the principalship, what does she know? How does she think she knows more than I know? And I'm sitting here doing this day in and day out. They forget that I came from that spot. But and that's one of the reasons I wasn't as enamored with central office is because I'd rather have been a peer doing the work alongside them, showing them that we can all do the same thing together. And I think it would have been much easier to implement standard-based grading with my peers if I had been able to do it along with them and say, "Hey, see, this is what we're doing, and this is how I overcame these challenges," if that makes sense. But I was able to find some core people that were my peers that grabbed it real fast. And so what we did was we created committees of those who grabbed it real fast, and we let them be the messengers. And said, "Hey guys, you can do this. This is what we're doing." So we just created subgroups and just said, "Do you guys think this is best for students?" And they said, "Yes." I said, "Are you willing to work with your peers to convince them?" "Yes." So that's how you go about doing that. You work with people who are on their level to say, "Hey," and you do the same thing in a school. You get team leaders or people who, "Do you believe in this?" in a leadership team meeting. Is this a direction we need to go as a school? How do you think that your teams will think about this? Is it too much at this time? The temperature reading across the school, if we implement this at this time, is it too fast? Is it too much too fast? Are they going to push back? How's it going to impact the students if we do this now? Um, what's going to happen? Or we're going to have 15 people absent next week because we're going to do this. What's going to be the impact of doing this? And so because they are the ones that sit and eat with them at lunch, so they know what the rumblings are in the school or amongst the schools. And so you talk to those who you know and who will talk to you and give you good feedback and know if you need to move on or if you need to stop and readjust. So that's how you get the buy-in or the consensus or enough consensus that you can move on. You're not going to get 100% buy-in. If you wait to get 100% buy-in, you're just going to stay stuck in the mud. But if you can get a big chunk of people that believe in this or you're going in the right direction. The research is telling you this is direction you need to go, and you can get people that are in key positions that are respected to help you with that, then you can probably move forward with that. But if those people are bucking and saying, "Oh, this is too much right now," then you might need to put that on the back burner until another time and bring it back out. You got to read your people, talk to your people, and decide, is this the time or not? That's when organizations make big mistakes, is when they don't listen or talk to key people who know the temperature of the organization.
Truly. That's truly wonderful advice. So, technology is transforming education in so many ways. How do you see digital tools supporting or challenging your efforts like Just Read and student read learning?
I think that, I mean, I'm a big Audible person. I listen to a
Me
lot of
too.
Audible books. I do a lot of traveling back and forth to my job. I live 3 hours away from where I work now. I do a lot of things Audible. I think you have to know your learner, and I think that there are some times when, you know, if a student struggles with the reading part and they're an auditory person, then you gotta make concessions for that. I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I think that in the meantime, give them the book, but also give them the auditory listening thing, make them follow along so they see the printed word. Just to listen and not see the printed word could be a deterrent to reading the printed word. I don't really have the research to back that sitting here right now. That's just my anecdotal, so don't go out and quote that. So anyway, I think that there is a lot of technology out there, but I also think that there's still a place for books. There's still a place for the Just Read program, sending the books home with because we don't have the Kindle devices to send home with every student and those kinds of things. I think that still using the books, learning to read that way, but I also think there is a place for the supplementary tools of using the technology as a tool, not and I think COVID taught us that we can use technology to assist in learning, but I don't believe anything replaces the human being.
Could not agree more. So, what excites you most about the future of education? What shifts do you hope to see in the next 5 to 10 years?
Wow. Let me just talk about what I hope first. What I hope is that we can maintain the value of reading, writing, arithmetic. I think to some degree there's seems to be some type of a lost art in that. The value of learning to be financially stable. I think those kinds of things need to be addressed. Okay. And I'm going to get this backwards. I know I am. There's a difference between working to live and living to work. And I think we need to come to a happy medium on both ends of that. And I think we are treading a scary line in our new generation. And that we aren't teaching our children that we need to hop from one job to the next without any thought of the future, saving or planning for what ifs. Okay. That, your young folks just eat up every sick day they got and no plan for the future. Okay. Now, what I hope education holds in the future is that there is a true focus on students. It's about the learning of students. We need students to learn, and they don't only need to learn the hard skills, they need to learn soft skills. I would hope that in the future, there would be some type of encouragement for parents to be involved in students' education in a positive way, that they would support the ownership of students' education, and that people would realize that there is no silver platter, no silver bullet that's going to solve the woes of education. It's a societal issue. It's not the school's responsibility to solve every societal woe in our nation, and that teachers should go in and teach students to think and problem solve and to read and write and add and subtract, learn about history and science, and not be responsible for every little detail in society.
I agree. I agree. Critical thinking. It's one of the we were even talking about it at the very beginning of the conversation is we have to be able to think critically and make decisions for ourselves. I could not agree more. So, we're almost out of time, but if you could, would you please leave our listeners with just one thing, one key takeaway idea or piece of advice that you'd like for them to remember?
Yeah. That there is no more valuable commodity in our nation than our children. And that our children, if we don't do something for them in the field of education to teach them to think and to learn, then we are missing the mark. That our children are the most valuable thing that we have. And the second most valuable thing that we have are our teachers who teach our children to think and to learn and to have ownership of themselves.
Dr. Downey, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your passion, your vision for the student ownership as well as literacy. Your work is amazing. It's truly made a difference, I know. And I think that our listeners are going to take away so many different valuable ideas.
Thank you. I appreciate being here today. It's been a joy.
To our audience, thank you so much for joining us on Innovating Education. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and share this episode with your fellow educators and changemakers. Together, let's keep reimagining the future of education one conversation at a time. Until next time, take care and keep innovating.